Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Sanibel Public Library today. My name is Duane Shaffer. I'm head of collection development for the library and your host for our virtual program today. Before we get started, I had a couple of program notes for you. On our next visit on May 14th, we will be concluding the Battle of Gettysburg with day 3. And on May 28th, we will be talking about the Battle of Fort Myers. Yes, there was a Battle of Fort Myers, and you need to tune in and we can tell you all about that. If you come to the library, we would like you to see our Civil War display that we have in our glass case, plus we do have Civil War books. If you go to the shelf, you will find those under 973.7. And we will be having a special guest with us today who will be doing a portion of this program. I'm not going to tell you who it is now, but I will introduce her in a little bit. Before we get started, I'd like to say thank you to Danny, our IT manager. Come on up, Danny, say hi. Okay. All right, I think it's probably time, and so let's get started. Okay, if you tuned in a little bit early, you saw our background behind me there. Actually, where you are viewing from the side of Little Round Top, looking down into the area of Plum Run and Crawford Avenue. And way, way back there is that ridge where there is the Emmitsburg Road and Seminary Ridges, which is where the Confederates were attacking from. If you go a little further down Crawford Avenue, you will hit Warren Avenue that goes up to Little Round Top, but that is also where you will find Devil's Den. So we're going to get started, and before we get into day 2, we need to do a little bit of setting the table. Here's a few people that you met in our last episode. You met them, and we talked about how the first day of Gettysburg actually began. On June 3rd, Lee begins his invasion of the North after convincing the Confederate government that it would be better to invade Pennsylvania, possibly scare the Federals into signing a peace agreement, maybe even getting some foreign recognition. He was able to convince Jefferson Davis, who's all the way over there on the left, that it would be a good idea to go ahead and invade Pennsylvania and get the Yankee army out there in the open somewhere and defeat them, and then they might sue for peace. Now, there's a lot of people on the screen there. On the very first day of battle, you have John Buford, who's down there in the right-hand corner. He's defending McPherson's Ridge, and you have General Heath on the left. He is coming from Chambersburg with his division, and they meet on the early morning of July 1st, and the battle begins. General Reynolds on the bottom of your screen, he is killed early in the action after he brings his first corps to Gettysburg, and then Abner Doubleday takes over from there. A.P. Hill, which you see just a little bit to the left of Lee, he's in charge. He's new and in charge of Lee's new 3rd Corps. He's going to be sick for most of the battle with various intestinal ailments, which doesn't allow him to have as much control over his troops as he would like. You see Jeb Stuart up there on the left. He is absent for the entire first day, and a lot of the blindness that Lee suffers from in intelligence is probably Stuart's fault, because he's supposed to supply Lee with movements of the Yankee army. And we see General Meade over there in the right. He is going to take over from Joe Hooker, who Abraham Lincoln sacks pretty much mid-March before they get to Gettysburg. And then Meade takes over, and he's got his hands full because he's going to fight a major battle in the next couple days. Speaking of General Meade, he has a plan for July 2nd July 1st, as you know, as we talked, the Second Corps of the Confederate Army and the First Corps came in from the west. They squeezed the Union troops down in and passed through Gettysburg, and you see the blue fishhook line that goes from Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill and goes all the way along Cemetery Ridge. That will be their position for day 2. Now, Meade does not arrive in Gettysburg until late on July the 1st, but he does have a very quick conference with his other corps commanders, and they decide that they are going to fight because they have that high ground just south of Gettysburg. He had the high ground, but more importantly, he's got what they call military circles interior lines, and he would be able to move troops in and around behind that blue line very quickly in case he needs to reinforce any part of that line. Lee, however, is at a disadvantage because he is operating in an arc all the way over there from where you see the Confederate left flank, all the way down and around the southern edge of Seminary Ridge, Moorfield Ridge, all the way down to that other side, which is going to be the Confederate right flank. So he is not going to be able to move troops around as quickly as he would like to. 6 of Meade's 7 Corps have arrived, giving him about 90,000 men. And on the other side of that ridge, we have Robert E. Lee, who, despite his apparent victory on July the 1st, here you see he could have turned the Union route, which they pushed the Federals down through Gettysburg. He could have turned that into a disaster for the Union had he given more direct orders. See, he was used to giving suggestions and almost was able to imply his orders to Stonewall Jackson. However, as you know, Jackson is wounded on the 2nd day of Chancellorsville on May 2nd and dies on May 10th. So Lee is without Jackson, of course, at Gettysburg. And the man who replaces him is Richard Ewell in the 2nd Corps. What he's going to do, he's planning on hitting the Federals on both of those flanks that I showed you, up on that right flank of the Union Army and the Union left. Now, there's going to be a lot of things that happen in between. Also, again, Stuart is not with him. He's not providing the vital intelligence that he needs. He still didn't have a clear picture of Meade's strength. Now, 2 things are going to come into play here on July the 2nd. 2 things that are going to have a definite effect on the battle for that day. Lee, early in the morning, sends out a reconnaissance team to look at the Union lines. They ride all the way around the flank, and they actually make it all the way up onto Big Round Top. They're on Big Round Top, and they're looking down that long line on Cemetery Ridge, and in Little Round Top at that point is not occupied, and there's a very big gap there along Cemetery Ridge. These scouts, they go back, they tell Lee this, and Lee begins to formulate his plan accordingly. But also something else is going to happen along the way. A New Yorker who we'll become very familiar with in the next few minutes is going to blow Lee's plans sky high. Also, guess who isn't happy about any of this that's going on? Yes, it is General Longstreet. General Longstreet spent the evening of July the 1st and the morning of July the 2nd trying to get Lee to disengage the Army of Northern Virginia and move around that right flank, the Confederate right flank that you see in the Union left flank. He wanted to move even further down and move around Cemetery Ridge, get between Meade and the routes to Washington. As we learned before, Gettysburg is a road hub. If he can block those roads coming out of Gettysburg going south and east, it could possibly block the Union Army. Also, Longstreet is not happy because one of his divisions, Pickett's division, hasn't even shown up yet. He's also worried about the division of Abender Law, who has not arrived, and he wants to be able to have them before he can mount any kind of attack. Well, what happened? Lee says, no, absolutely not. You are going to attack that federal left flank that's bare up there on Little Round Top. Again, he didn't know what was going to happen in the next few hours. He wanted him to go down there and roll up that Emmitsburg Road. Now, on the map that you see there, right to the left of Cemetery Ridge, you see that yellow line. That is the Emmitsburg Road. We're going to be talking a lot about that in the next few minutes. What also was supposed to happen while Longstreet was attacking, going up the Emmitsburg Road with his divisions going in echelon all the way up there, Ewell was supposed to launch a diversionary attack, not even an attack, but he was supposed to do what they call a demonstration, sort of on the federal right flank at Culp's and Cemetery Hill. And what this brings to mind to me is what happened during World War II with General Patton. One of Patton's favorite sayings was he wanted to hold on to the enemy by the nose and kick him in the you-know-what. Now, this is basically what Lee wants to do. He wants to concentrate the federal attention up there on the Union right flank, thinking that that is where the main attack is going to come, but it is not. The main attack is going to be Longstreet coming up from the south, going up Cemetery Ridge. Okay, this is what's going to be Lee's plan, as you can see. We have A.P. Hill on the left. We have Richard Herron Anderson on underneath him. He is going to be in charge of mounting an attack in the center. Now, remember, A.P. Hill's corps took quite a beating on the first day, so he is really, really under strength. Plus, again, Hill is very sick. He's not able to give direct orders to his divisional commanders. You see on the right, you see Richard Ewell. That is his corps on the right there by Culp's Hill. And General Johnson is going to be in charge of what I call the demonstration. They're going to demonstrate there and try to hold the federal attention while Longstreet, as you can see in the south, with his two divisions, Hood and McLaws, again, Pickett is not around yet, so those are the two divisions that are going to mount the attack. Now, this is Lee's ideal plan, as you can see. As you know, things are not going to work out exactly the way Lee would like them to happen. This is the guy I was telling you about, Daniel Edgar Sickles. He was a New York politician, what they used to call a political general. And I put up at the top, the disaster at Sickles Salient. Now, before we get too far into this, I'm going to say that what he is about to do is going to have incredible impact on the course of this battle. Also, I'm going to say that there's a lot of people who were in favor of what he did. A lot of people were also very, very critical. Now, what happened with Dan Sickles, he is in charge of the 3rd Corps, and he is, I'm just very briefly going to show you where he is along the Taneytown Road. This is the area that he is assigned, where you see the big letter B. That is his assigned position along Cemetery Ridge. What he's going to do, he is going to move his line almost a half a mile west in the shape of that triangle there, with the apex being right at the top at Schaefer's Peach Orchard. Stretching to the left, his left flank, Devil's Den, his right flank going up the Emmitsburg Road. But we're going to go back to Dan for a second. He sees that rise ahead of him, and he immediately becomes concerned because at Chancellorsville, this is what he had to deal with. He also was looking out. He saw some raised higher ground in front of him, and he did nothing at the time. However, that is when Jackson came roaring over that high ground and really punished Sickles' 3rd Corps. So Dan does not want this to happen again. So he moves his corps forward out there towards that Peach Orchard area and the wheat field. Now, before we get back to him, How many of you know what the famous scandal was that Dan Sickles was involved in 1859? I'll let you play along at home. Many of you do know, some of you don't. But very, very famous scandal. Dan Sickles' wife decided that she was going to have a little dalliance on him. So he found out who her lover was. Her lover happened to be the son of Francis Scott Key, who I know you know who that is. And he shot him dead right across the street from the White House. Now, of course, Dan Sickles, was he going to face a long prison sentence? Possibly. But he did the first possible plea that anyone ever did. He pled insanity, and he was acquitted for that. Now, what's that underneath there? What's this? That picture shows Dan gunning poor Key down in the street. Now, what's underneath there? What's this about Queen Isabella II? Well, after the war, Dan Sickles is United States ambassador to Spain. And there are unsubstantiated accounts of him having an affair with the Queen. So old Dan, he was a real player, I have to say. So now we're going to go back up here. This is the line, okay? Sickles had gone back to Meade's headquarters on the Taneytown Road, and he said, I don't like my position. I think I'm going to move it. And at that point, Meade was so busy trying to coordinate everything that was going to happen that day, he wasn't really paying attention to what Sickles was saying. And he said, okay, you do what you think is best. So Dan goes back. He does this maneuver. He puts those troops out there on the Emmitsburg Road. And then Meade starts to think, I wonder what he's going to do. So Meade sends his son out, George Meade, and to see what Sickles was doing. The younger Meade goes out, he sees this, goes back and tells his dad, he says, oh my God, he says, Dan Sickles moved his whole corps forward a half a mile. Meade goes crazy, he says, oh my God, and he rides out to see Sickles. And Sickles is there, well, what do you want me to do now? Do you want me to move back? And Meade goes, it's too late. Look, the Confederates were coming. And then General Hancock, who is in charge of the Second Corps, he's riding along there, and that's a really, really great picture by painting by John Paul Strain. He's looking up there and he sees Sickles' corps in absolute disbelief. He's looking up there and they're saying, well, what's Sickles going to do like that? And Hancock says, don't worry, you're going to see them tumbling back pretty soon. Now, this is a picture I wanted to show you. Oh, what's happened here? Okay, you see Dan Sickles in the middle, and you see he's missing a leg. Well, during the course of the battle that day, and you can see to the right, a 3-pound cannonball comes bouncing across the field and smashes into his leg. And he's taken off the field in a stretcher. He's smoking a cigar, and he wants his men to see how much in control he still is. Of course, the next day, later in the surgeon's tent, they take his leg off, and he has it wrapped in formaldehyde. He has it dunked in formaldehyde and wrapped up. And it was placed in a museum in Washington, and every once in a while he would go and visit his leg. Okay, so let's get to the battle, all right? Hood opens up on the far right of their line, and this is what's going to happen. You see General Hood and General McLaws, Lafayette McLaws, whose divisions under Anderson and Semmes. They're going to go forward. As you can see, they're going across there. You see up on the top there, you see the peach orchard, where I was telling you about. All of this is Sickles' corps. And you see Hood and McLaws, their Georgia regiments, and the Alabama regiments to the right that are going to eventually attack the Union left flank around the Devil's Den, Plum Run, and eventually to Little Round Top. Now, this is one of my pictures that I took. If you're standing on top of Little Round Top and looking down, you see that pile of rocks down there. That is the Devil's Den. And interesting side note, trivia, is that when I was living there, and again, several years after that, every summer during tourist season, at least somebody would be climbing around on those rocks and they would either break a leg or an arm. However, during the battle, this is going to be part of the far right of the Confederate line, far left of Sickles' line, as I showed you, with the way it was bent back, and a very vicious contest is taking place down there. People shooting over rocks, under rocks, and as you can see, I'm going to show you in the next slide after this one here. This is the beginning part of the battle in the wheat field. Now you see the Union troops are still pretty much in place up there by the Sherfy's peach orchard, but you have Kershaw's brigade and you have Barksdale's brigade getting ready to attack that peach orchard, but you have those Georgia regiments pouring through the rose woods, and they are gradually pushing Sickles' regiments and the division of Ward and de Toberon. They're gradually pushing them back towards the wheat field. The incredible tide of the Confederates is getting to be too much for the Sickles Corps. Now you see over on the left, McLaw's division, you see the last name Semmes. That is actually Brigadier General Paul Semmes. He is actually related to Raphael Semmes, who was an admiral in the Confederate Navy. Now here's the opposite picture that I wanted to show you. This is the view from those rocks down there on the Devil's Den. And that view that you see in the background, that is Little Round Top. Little Round Top is going to be the subject that our special guest is going to speak about. But as you can see, the Confederate troops, they're going up that long, long hill. Looks a little bit different today than it did back then. It was a lot more open back then. So you can see that they were able to really take aim at the occupants of Little Round Top. Now, this is the last part of the Battle of the Wheat Field. As you can see, Hood and McLaw's, they're making extreme penetration into the Union line there. And all of Sickles' Corps is just absolutely coming apart at the seams. They're coming down through there. And the next part I wanted to show you is one of the most storied brigades in the Union Army is on hand today at that battle. It is the Irish Brigade. And this is Father William Corby of the 88th New York. There's a very famous rock at Gettysburg with a statue of Father Corby. He stands on the rock and he gives absolution to the troops before they go into battle. And it's a very good thing that he does, because this is what they go into. There were actually only 3 regiments of the Irish Brigade present for Gettysburg. The other 2, plus those 3, had been very viciously mauled, not only at Fredericksburg, but also at Chancellorsville. So they are actually fielding, their entire brigade is actually fielding only about 200 or 300 men. And you see the casualties that they suffered in the wheat field. I couldn't help it, but I have to talk a little bit about New Hampshire. New Hampshire is also present at Gettysburg. The 5th New Hampshire, 12th New Hampshire, and the 2nd New Hampshire. Up in the left-hand side, you see a drawing of Colonel Edward E. Cross. He was the commander of the 5th New Hampshire, but today on July 2nd, he is the commander of the 1st Brigade in Hancock's 2nd Corps. Now, usually, like at Antietam, Fredericksburg, he would wear a red bandana like this one I have in my hand. Now, why would he wear a red bandana? Well, one of the reasons was that he wanted all of his troops to be able to see him wherever he was. But the other reason is he would like put it on top of his head like that to keep the sun off him, because he didn't have any hair either. So, but today on July the 2nd, he's wearing a black bandana. Now, this does not sound good. But General Hancock of the 2nd Corps rides up to him And he said, today, General, today, Colonel, you're going to get your star, meaning he was going to become a brigadier general. And Cross said, no, no. He says, not today. He says, I'm not going to make it. And of course, in the wheat field, he is shot in the abdomen, and then he dies the next day. But his last words were, I think the boys will miss me. Now, in the center there, that is the monument to the 12th New Hampshire that a lot of the veterans are congregating around. The 12th New Hampshire, the poor 12th New Hampshire, they were practically went out of existence at Chancellorsville. They took incredibly huge casualties, but they're back again for the Battle of Gettysburg. The 2nd New Hampshire, which you're going to hear a little bit more about, I actually have a picture of one of the soldiers of the 2nd New Hampshire, and you're looking at that saying, wait a minute, they're wearing gray. Well, in the beginning of the war, there wasn't a lot of uniformity about the uniforms. So this is how the guys left New Hampshire in the 2nd Regiment. Yes, he's wearing gray. He's also wearing a leather gray helmet. Now, of course, after a while, the uniforms became pretty much standard as the blue. But all of New Hampshire at the Battle of Gettysburg, they had about 900 soldiers there. They lost 107 men killed and about 274 wounded. Now, I mentioned about the 2nd New Hampshire. They came into play at the Peach Orchard. Now, if you take a look at the center of your screen, you see where it says Peach Orchard. Just a little bit to the left, you see the 2nd New Hampshire. And guess what? They are right at the apex of Sickles' line. And the Confederates, the brigades under Semmes Kershaw, again, they're hitting through the wheat field there. And you see Colonel Cross, his name down on the right-hand side. They're penetrating that far, and Sickles' whole line is just completely collapsing. General Barksdale attacks with his Mississippi regiments through the Schaeffer's Peach Orchard. And just a quick side note about Schaeffer's, the beautiful, beautiful thing is that today they have replanted that entire area with peach trees, and it is a beautiful sight. But on that day, the New Hampshire Regiment, the 68th Pennsylvania, the 114th PA, and the 57th, they're taking horrendous casualties as they're being pushed back. Now, here is a painting of General Barksdale. General Barksdale was a congressman in before the war, but then, of course, he left and he joined the Confederate Army. And this is him riding his horse, which his men told him not to do. They said, General, please don't ride your horse into battle. But he had been waiting. Now, keep in mind, this is what you need to know. All of these attacks did not begin until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, why was that? It was because General Longstreet had to get his troops into position. Now, there was some confusion during the day because he did not want his troops to be seen from Little Round Top, because again, at that point, there was only some signal flags going up there, but they would be able to see Longstreet's troops moving, and they went down a couple of wrong roads. They had to march back, then they had to march forward again, and they really didn't get into position until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and Longstreet, but to his credit, he did say after the war that that was the most intense, best fighting he ever saw happen in 3 hours, between 4 and 7 o'clock that day. Now, here is the last part of the attack in the center. You see Hill on the left, Anderson, and then McLaws. You see General Hancock, Humphreys, and Birney on the bottom. This was supposed to be happening pretty much simultaneously. But again, the reason why the plans did not go well is this attack also did not get underway until later in the day. Also, Ewell, who was supposed to start his diversionary attack, really didn't do very much. So Meade, as we indicated, was able to move his troops back and forth along those interior lines. As you see in the middle of that picture, you see a lot of little squares. That is basically what's left of Sickles' entire corps. And you see the arrow, they are being pushed back. Now, Hancock, to his credit, Meade, to his credit, he moves a lot of troops around to seal up these gaps. In fact, about 20,000 troops he moves from the 5th Corps and the 2nd Corps to keep this from being a complete and total disaster. Now, something that we need to talk about, because it is one of the most talked about important parts of the battle, is the 1st Minnesota. Now, you see on the left-hand side on your map, right just about in the middle, you see the 1st Minnesota. General Hancock, again, as I indicated, he's trying to seal up those gaps where the Confederates are all pushing through, the Alabamans, the Mississippians, and the Georgians, and he sees this gap opening up, and he rides by Colonel William Colville, the 1st Minnesota, who is right there, happens to be right there on the spot. He says, "Colonel, go take that flag," meaning attack those Alabamans. And as you see, there's a blue arrow right there in front of the 1st Minnesota. And this is what they do. They go pouring through, they fix their bayonets, and they break through that Confederate line. And what happens is that during this charge, 215 out of the 262 men present become casualties. They're either killed or wounded. They lose all but 3 of their captains. 5 color bearers of the 1st Minnesota were lost. When that flag goes down, somebody goes running right for it. They pick it up, and they see, and the enemy sees that. They shoot that color bearer, and he goes down. There was only 47 survivors that came back. It has the highest casualty rate during the battle of 82%, which is absolutely completely unheard of. And it has and as you can see, there's a very beautiful monument to the 1st Minnesota there. It is one of the most photographed monuments on the battlefield. Now, finally, all of this is happening. Now, we're going to be a little bit out of sequence as far as the timing, because I want to bring our special guest on in a few minutes to talk about Little Round Top. So, but we're going to go up, and the sun is actually going down about 7:30, 7:45. Again, this is the summertime. And then Ewell and his corps finally come into action. Now you see General Howard on the left, and you see General Slocum on the right top, and you have General Sykes on the bottom. Sykes is going to be important because he is going to provide the men for the defense of Little Round Top. Well, finally, the fight on the Union right gets underway, and the attacks, because it is twilight and almost dark, there's fighting on Brinkerhoff's Ridge with the Stonewall Brigade, but not a lot happens, again, because everything was so badly coordinated and the Union line is holding. This is what the Culp's Hill defense looked like. A bunch of New York troops and PA troops. Those are all there, and actually they are able to hold that high ground despite the fact that there were several attacks mounted on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill. Now here's a little bit of a sobering bit of trivia for you. We were talking about the 1st Minnesota and how badly mauled they were. At the Battle of Gettysburg, there were about 120 generals. Have you ever imagined any battle that there were that many generals present? At Gettysburg, 9 were killed or mortally wounded during the battle. And as I indicated, Semmes, Barksdale was killed. We're not going to talk about Armistead and Garnett right now because they belong to the 3rd day. But General Reynolds, of course, he was killed on the 1st day. Zook and Weed will be killed on the 2nd day. No other battle can claim that many generals as casualties. Okay, this is the last part of the evening attacks at Culp's Hill. As you can see, a lot of the Virginia regiments, Louisiana regiments under General Johnson, they make their attacks. Of course, remember, the Federals are on that high ground, so they're able to shoot down over their battlements, and they're able to take a lot of casualties. Those Virginia regiments are repelled. That's what those arrows are, where they're turned around, they're repelled. And this is the close-up attack on Cemetery Hill. You see General Schurz and von Steinwehr. They were division commanders in Howard's Corps. Again, they're holding their own, and they have the Louisiana regiments and several, and the North Carolina regiments. They're pouring around to the right there, trying to make any kind of movement around there. Okay, you thought you could escape, but it's not going to happen. We have a pop quiz here for you, okay? And again, you can play at home. So I'm going to ask you, what is the most photographed monument at Gettysburg? Okay, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. Okay, the most popular monument photographed at Gettysburg is the Irish Brigade monument. Now, you're probably wondering what that is like, sort of at the bottom of that. That is an Irish wolfhound, okay? Now, I am very happy to introduce someone. This is Holly Shaffer. This is my wife, and she's going to carry you through the Battle of Little Round Top. That's ours back. And I'm going to turn over the last part of the program to her. Holly?
And I bet you're wondering why I'm getting to do Little Round Top. It's because I volunteered at the Joshua Chamberlain Museum for 9 or 10 years. I would travel 90 miles to get there. My focus is, I'll tell you about some of the action there, but my specialty is talking about the people and what happened with them. Little Round Top. Brigadier General Gouverneur Warren was chief engineer of the Army of the Potomac, and he discovers to his great dismay that Little Round Top was unoccupied. I think Duane alluded to that, with the exception of a few signalmen there. And he sends his staff off to find some troops to defend this essential position. It is one of the pieces of the high ground at Little Round Top. And you can see Gouverneur Warren there. And there he is overlooking part of Devil's Den as he stands on Little Round Top. And there are the signalmen that are placed there. Warren sends messengers to Meade and Sickles, and he wants immediate assistance. You remember Duane talking about Dan Sickles? If he had been where he was supposed to be, Little Round Top would have been safer, much safer, but he wasn't thinking about anyone else but himself. That's my opinion. Colonel Strong Vincent intercepts these orders because his commander is nowhere to be found, and he's a man of action. He commands the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Division of the 5th Corps, and he hears about this threat and he takes responsibility. He takes his men there on the double quit, he selects the grounds, and he personally placed each of his 4 regiments. And when the 16th Michigan begins to fall back under heavy pressure, Vincent climbed to the boulder and gave this famous quote, "Don't give an inch." He has his wife's riding crop that he's brandishing. Strong Vincent is 26 years old, and that's a monument to him at Gettysburg there. And there's actually one that's really him, but they're not allowed to put a tribute to an individual like that there. So he's supposed to be an anonymous soldier, but if you look for it, you will find him. What happens to Strong Vincent? He entrusts his left flank to my men, the men from Maine, the 20th Maine. Vincent's orders to Chamberlain were hold the ground at all hazards, and that the left flank is the end of the Union line. Within minutes of forming his line, Vincent's brigade was assaulted by Confederate regiments of Law and Robertson's brigade. A desperate battle will ensue, and I'll talk about a little more about that in a minute. I really want to just fill you in a little bit about Strong Vincent because I don't think he gets his due. And it ensues across the entire brigade line. The line held, but the cost was high, including Vincent, who was mortally wounded, and he dies 5 days later on July 7th. For his actions, he was promoted to brigadier general. And this is actually a picture, a painting by Keith Rocco, and it's on one of the signs at Gettysburg as well. And he is personally instructing Joshua Chamberlain where he needs to put his men. A couple of quotes from Vincent. This is a letter that he had written to his wife a few days before the battle. If I fall, remember you've given your husband to the most righteous cause that ever widowed a woman. Does that give you a lump in your throat? It does me. And then this is what he says on the march to Gettysburg. And he's a Pennsylvania man, by the way. What death more glorious can any man desire than to die on the soil of old Pennsylvania, fighting for the flag? So remember Strong Vincent when you go to Gettysburg. A couple of other people I want to mention before I go on to Joshua Chamberlain. Also there that day, Little Round Top, the 140th New York Regiment from General Stephen Weed's brigade arrives, sent by Gouverneur Warren to reinforce the Union position. Its commander, Colonel Patrick O'Rourke, was killed almost instantly. And over there on the left is a picture that I took that is of his statue on Little Round Top. And a strange tradition that they have is that people go over and see how shiny his nose is there. They go rub it for luck. Soon, Weed's other three regiments, the 146th New York, the 91st, and the 155th Pennsylvania, remember their names, joined them. Weed, standing near one of Hazlitt's guns, was killed by a shot to the head from a Confederate sharpshooter down below in Devil's Den. Lieutenant Hazlitt, too, fell dead, also the victim of a Devil's Den sharpshooter, almost instantaneously right after his commander. And over on the right there, you will see Devil's Den looking down from Little Round Top. And the reason I tell you to remember their name is because one of the things Duane and I do, we visit monuments, we visit stones to the men, we visit cemeteries, so that those men are never forgotten, and some of the women that served as well. Here's my special person, Joshua Chamberlain. This is a print that I happen to own, and it's called A Hard Day for Mother. This is Chamberlain riding on his horse. They're very near the action at Little Round Top at this point. But who are the other two men with him? On the far left is his brother, Tom Chamberlain. Tom had been promoted to his adjutant and general. And in the middle, with the horse rearing back, that is his brother, John. John was there with the Christian Commission. They worked with the Sanitary Commission. The Christian Commission, obviously, as part of its duty was to be evangelical, but it also tended to the social needs of the soldiers, and it would also work with the Sanitary Commission to take care of the medical needs. Now, what does this mean when it says a hard day for mother? Well, a shot goes off, and Joshua Chamberlain realizes that Mrs. Chamberlain could lose all three of her sons. So he sends John to the rear to go prepare for the wounded, Tom to the front, so they are not all together at the same time. And just briefly, I just want to give you like 30 seconds about Joshua Chamberlain. Joshua Chamberlain was a professor at Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine, when in 1862 he decided that it was his duty to go to war. And he goes to the governor of Maine, Israel Washburn, and offers his services. And he was willing to offer him the colonelcy of the 20th Maine. but he didn't feel he was qualified. He had gone to Major Whiting's Military Academy for a year, I believe, but he was not qualified. So he will go as lieutenant colonel. But by this time, the colonel of the 20th Maine, Adelbert Ames, had been promoted, and Joshua Chamberlain becomes colonel the end of May, beginning of June of the 20th Maine. Bowdoin College didn't want him to go. They tried to stop it, but he did go. This is the Battle of Little Round Top, the initial assault. So this is Vincent's brigade, and you can see the 16th Michigan at the very end, and that's who Strong Vincent was trying to rally there. Then the 44th New York, the 83rd Pennsylvania, and the 20th Maine. And over there to your right, you're going to see Company B. They had been detached by Chamberlain to be behind the stone wall to protect his left flank. He thought it was in the air, and they are joined by a few sharpshooters as well. When I was volunteering at the Chamberlain Museum, it wasn't the Oates Museum, but I did tell about Colonel Oates because I feel it's important for people to know the human side of these gentlemen and what they were like. This is Colonel William C. Oates. His men were the 15th Alabama, and they had been ordered to attack the Union troops on Little Round Top. But they were forced to move farther to the right towards Big Round Top to escape the Union artillery fire coming from the wheat field and the peach orchard. Oates had sent a group of 22 canteen bearers, water carriers, to fill this for his thirsty men as they climbed the rugged slopes of Big Round Top. And by the way, at that time, it's called Round Top, and Little Round Top is called a dozen different names. Sugarloaf, it wasn't called Little Round Top till later, or maybe that little hill over there. And this was a really good vantage point for them to be at. It's much higher than Little Round Top, a better location, but they are ordered to leave because they have to advance to go to Little Round Top. Hence his two regiments, because part of the 14th Alabama is fighting with the 15th, attacked Chamberlain. They were very exhausted and extremely thirsty because they had marched more than 25 miles. 20th Maine, if you look at their record, like 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 18 miles, 20 miles, and so on. So they had marched very far for many days as well. But they had water. Here's Joshua Chamberlain. In May 1863, he was promoted to colonel of the 20th Maine. I told you that. Did you ever see the movie Gettysburg? If you did you remember the part where he gives this moving speech to the men of the 2nd Maine? The mutineers, I believe they show it like a day or two before the battle. Well, this actually happens in mid to late May. The 2nd Maine was a 2-year regiment, but somehow some of the men, about 120 of them, ended up with paperwork that signed them up for 3 years. So off goes the rest of their soldiers that had fought with them, and they're stuck for another year, and they didn't think that was fair. And so some of them were arrested as mutineers, and they were handed over to Chamberlain. The transfer within the 2nd Maine, he wrote, had been clumsily done, that the men were allowed to grow quite mutinous, left uncared for in their old camp after the 2nd had been gone for several days, and having time and provocation to work themselves into such a pitch of mutiny that General Barnes had sent them to me, and that's the head of the 5th Corps, as prisoners. Chamberlain was given authority to shoot them, but he used a far gentler approach. He fed them, gave them blankets, and distributed them among the 10 companies of the 20th Maine. He offered them a choice. You may serve in the 20th Maine or not, but he would not threaten them. All but 6 accepted. So while that speech that he gave was very moving, I know he talked to his men, but it wasn't quite the same as in the movie Gettysburg. And by the way, one of the things that brings Joshua Chamberlain to great fame is the book Killer Angels. Remember, that's historic fiction. Some of it's true, but some of it is fiction. But that becomes the movie Gettysburg. And that's where people discover Joshua Chamberlain. That's not how I discovered him. I actually discovered him at Gettysburg. But it's also caused resentment among some people because Chamberlain got recognition that perhaps other people did not. But it is a book, and he could not put everyone in it. I'm happy he put Chamberlain in it. He points one of them, Andrew Tozier, by the way, of the 2nd Maine, as his color bearer to the vacant position of color sergeant. Tozier would later be awarded the Medal of Honor for his courage. And I'll try not to forget to mention him because he is one of the amazing heroes at this battle that will rage. And this is just to show you where the 20th Maine is and where the Alabamans will be. You see where it's over to the right of the screen there, to their left, it was where Company B was detached to protect the flank and where the sharpshooters were located there. I think there were about 14 sharpshooters there, but you can see each of the companies. You can see part of the other line, the 83rd Pennsylvania and the 44th New York. And for many years, when you visited Little Round Top, you would see one flank marker, but you wouldn't see the other, and they did replace it. So now you can see the left and right flanks of the Union line. And if you follow those flank markers, you'll see some stone walls. They actually threw up stone walls during the battle, some boulders, not as high as they are today, but they definitely used that for protection. Little overview of what happened. Few weeks became a blur of movement for the 20th. They traveled in pursuit of the Army of the Northern Virginia, throughout Virginia and into Maryland. And I told you how many days they were marching, how many miles. On July 1st, as they prepared to leave Union Mills, which was Maryland, about 18 miles away, orders arrived insisting that they rush to Gettysburg as the Army of Potomac had engaged Confederate forces. On July 2nd, the 2nd day of Gettysburg, the 20th Maine initially is sitting in reserve until about 3:30, when the new commander of the Army of the Potomac, George Meade, redeployed the 5th Corps to bolster the Union left flank. And by the way, you might see some pictures of their flag, the symbol of the 5th Corps, 1st Division, 3rd Brigade, the Maltese cross with a white background. The cross is red, the background's white and with blue trim, triangular shape. Vincent's 3rd Brigade, I talked about that with you, occupied Little Round Top. The 20th Maine's 358 men occupied the left of the line. There's nobody beyond that, atop the rocky spur on the hill's south slope. So when you visit there, it's divided by a road. Chamberlain deployed Company B forward to the regiment's left flank as skirmishers. The 44 men of Company B were cut off by a flanking attack, leaving the 20th with only 315 armed men along their regimental line. Also helping to defend Little Round Top were the 14 men of the 2nd U.S. sharpshooters. Not the ones my New Hampshire men were in, but still amazing men. Very accurate. 2 brigades of Confederate infantry attacked the 3rd Brigade, and 2 regiments, the 15th and the 47th Alabama, focused their attacks on the 20th Maine. 6 times the Alabamans attempt to dislodge the Maine soldiers. At one point, the 15th Alabama managed to slip around the eastern slope, and assail the 20th from the rear. They're getting back there, but Chamberlain undoubled his line. So remember, it was a double line, and he's going to do some sidestepping to the left, and they're going to put it into almost like a V shape single line is going to help to repel the assault. And this is the final assault. And you can see the 20th Maine at the end there. Can you see that V shape? You can see all the regiments that are attacking and where the 15th and the 47th Alabama are focused. And by the way, at one point, Joshua, whose brother Tom is there as his adjutant, his lieutenant, there's a break in the line, and he has to send his brother Tom to go make sure that that spot is filled. And he really doesn't think his brother is going to come back from that. Can you imagine, after worrying about him being shot earlier? So he also sends someone else out to make sure that that happens. But his brother does return. Let me talk about this picture, and then I'll talk about what's happening here. This is called The Lions of the Round Top, and it's by the artist Don Troiani. And it's extra special to me because before I started volunteering at the Chamberlain Museum, I entered a raffle. I visited there, bought a ticket for $1. John Poulin, who I'll talk about in a minute, who wrote the regimental history of the 20th Maine many years later. He was not obviously there, but a tremendous regimental, pulled my name out, and I won that print, and it sits in my living room, dining room today, and someday it will be my son's. And it's very sentimental to me because the 20th Maine and Joshua Chamberlain speak to my heart. Well, what's happening here? They're low on ammunition, and Chamberlain decides to fix bayonets. And if you're into this military history part, you'll know that there's all different types of views as to whether or not he said the word bayonet. The charge was spontaneous. Is he leading the charge? What's happening? Well, they are low on ammunition. And by the way, Colonel Oates is going to say that they were getting low on ammunition, and they are really tired, and they're out of gas. They don't have much either, and that they were going to leave anyway. We won't know that, but I'm assuming that there might be some truth to that. And by the way, Chamberlain had his right foot hit by a piece of shrapnel or something, so he's limping. And he also had the scabbard area of his sword hit. Fortunately, it was deflected, so he has a huge bruise. So he's not in the best shape, but he's still standing and fighting. But the word is going to spread that they are going to fix bayonets. What is said that at Holman S. Melcher, that gentleman there that you can see holding the sword, he had asked Chamberlain if he could go further forward to gather his men that were wounded from his company. And that's when Chamberlain said, well, I'm about to order a right wheel forward. If he said that, or even if he didn't, it didn't matter, because what they were going to do is go forward with bayonets. They are low on ammunition. Corporal William Livermore noted in his diary, with fixed bayonets and with a yell, we rushed on them, which so frightened them that not another shot was fired on us. Some threw down their arms and ran, but many rose up, begging to be spared. So there's Melcher. He's runs ahead of Chamberlain, who was leading the charge, I believe. His former curator of the Joshua Chamberlain Museum, which at the time was run by the Pejepscot Historical Society, now it's called the Pejepscot History Center, said that Chamberlain would have always been leading his men, and I agree with that. But there's Melcher, and there you see Chamberlain with his sword on this Alabama soldier, ordering him to, he tried to shoot Chamberlain, and it didn't work. His gun misfired, or he was a terrible shot, and then he takes his sword, ordering him to surrender. And by the way, years after the war, Chamberlain gets a letter from an Alabama soldier who said, I knew who you were. I had you in my sights. He could see he was a colonel, and something told me to shoot, but he stopped himself, and he stopped himself again, and his life was spared. That gentleman from Alabama could have killed him. And by the way, the gentleman that Chamberlain is holding at sword point, Chamberlain had his weapon, and that's belongs to the Maine State Museum in Augusta, and they periodically exhibit that as well. Colonel Oates writes about the blood pooling on the rocks here. And fortunately, at this point, as they're descending, Company B is able to lead them at the decisive point of the bayonet charge, and that is the little marker for Company B. His group created the impression of two regiments rushing through the woods. They'd be able to stand up, fire, move along, and that definitely gave the 20th Maine the support that they needed. Though it only consisted of 44 Company B soldiers and 14 sharpshooters, they still had ammunition, and it was this group that Oates believed caused panic in his men. Couple of things here. I forgot to mention Andrew Tozier. He's their color guard, their color sergeant. And during the battle, and that's the most dangerous place to be, by the colors, by the flag, Tozier is standing there by the flag, held around, holding it with his left arm and firing with his right. A cool customer standing there in the face of lead flying at him. And that is why he is awarded the Medal of Honor. One last thing, Colonel William C. Oates has his brother John there that day. His brother John is shot during the retreat. He can't gather up his brother to take him with him. He stays on the battlefield. Joshua Chamberlain's brother John was safely away at that point with the Christian Commission. Now he will die 2 years later from tuberculosis. But William C. Oates was beside himself about his brother. And what will happen 22 days later, he will die. He will die in a Union hospital, and he was treated very well there. But for Oates, he never got over the fact that he had to leave his brother as one of the wounded behind. Finally, the battle is over, and it's going to rage anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes, depending on which count you believe. But the Pennsylvania Brigade, who relieves them, they were supposed to go assault Big Round Top, and trust me, that's much steeper. So the new commander of the 3rd Brigade, Colonel James Rice, because remember, Strong Vincent is shot, approached Chamberlain requesting that he lead the assault, because this other group, he didn't think his men were prepared to do that. Turning to his tired troops, Chamberlain said, "Boys, I'm asked that if we can carry that hill in the front." Chamberlain called for volunteers, and his regiment rose as one. He wasn't going to make them, but they all go up Big Round Top. I don't think this nearly gets enough credit. In the dark, at 9 p.m., the survivors of the afternoon battle surged Big Round Top and gained the summit. And they captured 30 prisoners from a Texas regiment. It is very dangerous being up there because there are skirmishers. They are in the dark. And just that's a close-up of the monument to the 20th Maine on Big Round Top. On the morning of July 3rd, 20th Maine men skirmished with Confederates on the western slope of the hill, losing one of its officers. Lieutenant Lynn Scott, mortally wounded by a gunshot wound to the thigh. By 10 a.m., the reluctant Pennsylvania Brigade finally relieves the 20th Maine. And here's my favorite monument. That is the monument to 20th Maine. It's very simple. It's not placed at the height of the action. So that is the front over there on the right, and on the left, you can see the side of it. This last one was taken at the end of last November there. I thought you might enjoy seeing this personal picture of Duane and I a few years ago at Little Round Top. Little Round Top speaks to my soul. In fact, every place we go, you can feel the spirit of the men and women that are there. One last story I'm going to wrap up here. That's Joshua Chamberlain's Medal of Honor. And Joshua Chamberlain's Medal of Honor. Was he in another battle? Well, no, what happens is he was given the Medal of Honor for his gallantry at Little Round Top, and it comes in the mail, and he gets it 30 years later. No big ceremony. But they always thought that the one he got was the one on the right. That is in the special collections section of Bowdoin College. They used to carry it out. A student would carry it out in a little gloved hand. Now they have it on display. I don't know what's happening with COVID right now, but that's the only one we ever thought there was. Somebody a few years ago went to a book sale in Massachusetts. His granddaughter had donated some things to the church, and in the back of the book was Joshua Chamberlain's original Medal of Honor sent to him in 1893. And so now the Penobscot Historic Center, the Joshua Chamberlain Museum, has that. Why is there one from 1904? Because they sent new ones out. So there are actually two. By the way, I work at Edison Ford Winter Estates. I'm a program manager. I hope you'll come visit me because I love talking history. But I hope that you will go to Brunswick, Maine, and you will hear the story of Joshua Chamberlain and visit his home. It's a small museum, but it's wonderful, and it will move you beyond belief. Before I read the last question, I just want you to know that the 20th Maine's monument was dedicated in 1893. Joshua Chamberlain was a professor of modern languages, but before that, he was an instructor of rhetoric. I'll read this quickly, but I want you to hear the beauty of his words. In great deeds, something abides. On great fields, something stays. Forms change and pass, bodies disappear, but the spirits linger to consecrate grounds for the vision place of souls, and reverent women and men from afar, and generations that know us not, and that we know not of, heart drawn to see where and by whom great things were suffered and done for them, shall come to this deathless field to ponder and dream, and lo, the shadow of a mighty presence shall wrap them in its bosom, and the power of the vision shall pass into their souls. And he said that when the 20th Maine Monument was dedicated. Just quickly, two recommended books. 20th Maine by John Pullen. He wrote it in 1957, one of the best regimental histories ever. If you don't own it, go out and buy it. If you're interested in the Civil War, I know that you have this as an ebook. This is called Joshua Chamberlain, In the Hands of Providence, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the American Civil War. Alice Raines Trulock, she loved Chamberlain. That comes through in her book. It's a great story. One of the first ones I've read. I've read every book about him, and there's quite a few. But you guys have this in an ebook at your library. Don't miss taking it out. And I'm going to wrap it up with this. This was Duane's question based on something I used to tell him. Was Buster Kilrain a real person? Whoops, we went back. I don't know if I can go back. There he is. Was Buster Kilrain a real person? Who's Buster Kilrain? Well, he's in the movie Gettysburg. And he's always saying, Colonel, me darling. And people came to the Chamberlain Museum.
Are you sure he wasn't a real person?
No, he wasn't a real person. He was
Really?
a fictionalized character in Killer Angels and in Gettysburg. And people would come to the Chamberlain Museum, one person in particular, and claim that he was her great-great-grandfather. And people used to leave notes to Joshua Chamberlain on his grave, because you can visit that, and they would say Joshua was their great-great-grandfather. Well, his children had children, grandchildren, but they never had children. And I assure you that Joshua Chamberlain had a wound that would have made it impossible for him to have any other children. That will happen later on. But I thank you for the privilege of getting to speak to you. Here you go. I'll turn it back over to Duane.
No, stay here.
Okay.
Stay here. There she is, see? Okay, the sun is going down on that second day, and it was the largest and costliest of those 3 days. That second day's fighting resulted in about 15,000 men killed and wounded. It's classified as the 10th bloodiest battle if you just took it out of the context of the 3 days. Far more casualties. And the sad thing is that there was absolutely no tactical or strategic advantage was gained by either side, other than the fact that the Union line held, They were severely, severely weakened in the center. And guess what? This did not go unnoticed by General Robert E. Lee. But that is another story which we're going to talk about on May 14th. Thank you for visiting us today. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye. Say bye. The sun's going down, and that again, oh, here we are back on top of Little Round Top. And Holly looks like she's disintegrating.
I
but
think
she
that's
isn't.
my shirt.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.